The end of the 15th century was a turbulent time for the Mediterranean region. Ships travelled ever further. Religious conflicts were deepening, and gunpowder was the most common means of settling an argument. After a campaign which lasted for 774 years, Spain finally regained hold of the Iberian Peninsula, conquering it back from the Arabs. In the same year, Christopher Columbus reached the shores of the new continent, America. The city-states of Genoa and Venice were flourishing. As for the Ottoman Empire, the new 16th century began with the successful military campaigns led by Sultan Selim I in Iran, Iraq and Palestine, followed by Syria, Lebanon and Egypt. He conquered the cities of Cairo and Algiers, as well as the holy cities of Islam associated with the life of Muhammad, Mecca and Medina. After this conquest, all sultans of the Ottoman Empire would inherit and bear the title of caliph and would exercise both secular and religious power throughout the Islamic world. New villages and cities were established. One such village appeared in the center of Bulgaria, where the river Rosica makes a sharp bend around a small piece of land almost entirely surrounded by water. It was included in the Ottoman tax register, also known as Defter, in 1516. The entry mentions simply Sevlievo, not previously included in the register. The location of the village was chosen to be near the river for a good reason. The refugees may have brought a different or even an alien culture to the Balkans, but they brought new skills with them, along with crafts that were rarely practiced until then. One such craft was leather processing. In order to transform sheepskin into a pair of elegant gloves, you need extensive pasture land, livestock, a supply of fresh water, and, of course, a lot of hard work. Hard work is essential. Most of the workers were Bulgarian. They were, in fact, the first inhabitants of Sevlievo. Gradually, the local people mastered the art of this craft and opened their own leather processing workshops, which were in reality small leather processing factories. This process contributed to the town's prosperity over the centuries. Thus, the village of Sevlievo, established at the beginning of the 16th century, grew up to become the town of Sevlievo. Rivalry soon arose between Sevlievo and the neighbouring town of Gabrovo. This kind of rivalry is not uncommon in other parts of the world as well. It all began with a joke that the citizens of Gabrovo used to make about their neighbours. Literally translated, it means, the mountain yields people, but the plains only yield pumpkins, implying that the people of Sevlievo, born in the plains, were inferior to the people of Gabrovo. Today, the people of Sevlievo proudly call their town the pumpkin capital. They used this joke to their advantage, making it their symbol. If we touched that pumpkin with the fairy godmother's magic wand, what would it turn into? Maybe we would discover the reason why the local people take such pride in their ancestry. Paradoxically, the people of Sevlievo lead a double life. It's amazing how a town in a Christian province of the Ottoman Empire, independently of the processes afoot in Western Europe at the same time, made good use of the virtues of conservative Protestantism: hard labour, asceticism and pragmatism. At first, it really might seem to be a paradox. Sevlievo appeared on the map of Europe in 1516, just 1 year before Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses of the Reformation in the courtyard of Wittenberg Castle Church. It's quite logical that Puritanism should emerge in the age of Reformation, but why should it be so prominent in Oriental Bulgaria? Let's see what they have in common. Seemingly an ordinary little town, there is more to Sevlievo than meets the eye. Hard work is hardly ever glamorous, or the centre of attention. But here, opposites coexist in perfect harmony. It is this duality that provides the key to the town's mystery. It's located between the plains and the mountains. Its people had little in common with the common peasants farming their lands, or with the mountain people, who were notoriously detached and distant. Though it seems to be asleep, nestling in the embrace of the Rosica River, Sevlievo actually makes the most of its conflicting surroundings. It's a town with interesting archaeological finds. One of the finest examples of plastic arts, dating from the early Thracian period, was unearthed near the village of Agatovo, located in the Sevlievo region. It's a 16-centimetre high figure of a stag. It was probably meant as a burial artifact. Although the figure of the animal is only outlined, it masterfully depicts the grace and the perfect proportions of its limbs, the proud head raised high, with its large eyes and the fine branches of the antlers, characteristic of this noble animal. The miniature stag is now part of the collection of the National Archaeological Institute at the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, and has been exhibited in many countries around the world. You may have seen it. Sevlievo also has a fortress of its own, but it began functioning as a town as far back as the 10th century. In the western part of the Sevlievo mountains, the river Rosica passes through a picturesque gorge. After his journey in these lands in 1871, the Austro-Hungarian naturalist Felix Kanitz wrote, "Nothing is known about ancient finds in the town of Sevlievo. However, Sevlievo is an advantageously located, strategic place. This leads me to believe that such evidence will be found." 1979, Bulgarian archaeologists proved that he was right in his assumptions. A Byzantine fortress existed here in the 5th century, to serve as a fortification defending the eastern borders of the Roman Empire following its division. As of the 10th century, it was already a fully functional town, with 4 districts, 3 churches and numerous public buildings. It was a feudal tenure, 2 centuries ahead of its western counterparts. There is a popular saying in Europe, "Where Rome ends, the Dark Ages begin." It would be convenient to say that after Bulgaria fell under Ottoman rule, the people gradually went down to live in the comfort of the fertile fields. But that wasn't what happened. The modern town was shaped as a result of the hard work and skill of the Sevlievo craftsmen. A strong guild of craftsmen was formed. The Ottoman Empire officially acknowledged the guilds by a firman or decree issued by Sultan Mustafa III in 1773. According to the firman, the officially recognized bodies were the General Assembly, the Great Lodge, the Managing Council or the Lesser Lodge, and the Internal Court. Culprits and criminals shall be punished by public condemnation and humiliation before the guild and society. The culprits shall also be subject to corporal punishment by beating their bare back and feet using hard wooden rods. The guild was directly subordinate to Yahu Baba, the chairman of the council of the guild in Istanbul, which acted as an administrative court. Regional control was exercised by a kekaya. In the Balkan region, this position was typically occupied by Bulgarians. The most prestigious but the hardest craft was leather processing. It was brought to Europe from Asia Minor around 1516. This was about the time Sevlievo was first mentioned in the Ottoman tax registers. With all the herds of livestock in the region numbering thousands of animals, it was only natural that this craft would flourish here. It brought prosperity to the town. There were other leather craftsmen as well, such as furriers and cobblers, but they worked with so-called hard leather, and their produce was mainly for local use. Leather workshops processed leather for export as a luxury item. Unlike the town of Gabrovo, where leather was processed mainly for the production of shoes, saddles and belts, the leather processed in Sevlievo was so-called soft leather. It was a highly valued commodity in Europe and Asia alike, as it combined the high quality of Oriental craftsmanship with the qualities which only industrial manufacturing could provide. A unique feature of the Sevlievo leather processing workshop was that, unlike other typical workshops, there was no living space. The building was solely for manufacturing. It typically occupied 2 or 3 floors, with each floor for a different type of process. In the second half of the 19th century, there were nearly 50 workshops along the bank of the Rosica River. Between 1,000 and 1,500 people were employed in these workshops. Proximity to the river wasn't the only factor contributing to the success of these craftsmen. Groundwater played a major role as well. Every workshop had its own water supply. This was an overwhelming advantage. Sevlievo's craftsmen specialized in processing leather from sheep, goats, lambs and kids. Their skins were used to produce high-quality meshin and blank leather, leather for gloves, bags, clothing and even Morocco leather for bookbinding. This tricky production process was perfected to such an extent that in 1889 the Belgian consul Janssen was impressed by the high quality of the leather processing workshops in a town as small as Sevlievo. He remarked that at the time, around 16,000 semi-processed skins and wool were sent to Austria every year, and was amazed that the quality of Sevlievo leather was comparable to that elsewhere in Europe. The leather craftsmen of Sevlievo earned a good income, and many of them accumulated a fortune. Leather sales from Sevlievo alone amounted to 30 to 40,000 gold Ottoman lira. Sevlievo leather was mainly sold in Vienna, but it also enjoyed a good market share in Leipzig, Paris, Dubrovnik, St. Petersburg, Istanbul and Genoa. Sevlievo craftsmen sold their produce there either by establishing their own shops or by using the services of trade agents. Meanwhile, their children would learn the craft at home. The only trader was the craftsman himself. Before learning the secrets of the trade, his heir would first need to work hard to master the craft itself. After travelling around Europe, Sevlievo tradesmen gradually introduced the European way of life into this small Balkan town. They brought back furniture, accessories and clothes from Vienna, or even a harmonium for a beloved daughter. It's interesting to note how this particular member of the town's elite divided his house into 3 self-contained parts, with entrances of their own. There were no passages connecting the 3 parts. Thus his family and the families of his sons could live separately without disturbing each other's privacy. This is where they watched the comings and goings on the market square, or exchanged gossip. Even while still under Ottoman rule, the people of Sevlievo had organized their own municipality. This was the body which actually governed the town. Its 4 chairmen were respected representatives of all the guilds. The municipality took all major decisions about the future of the town. In order to guarantee full consensus, all acts were sealed using a seal divided into 4 parts. No decision could be made without the explicit consent of all the town's notables. Could this be seen as a bourgeois revolution, a middle-class uprising? Yes, absolutely. The male monastery of the Ascension of the Virgin Mary at Batoshevo was built in 1836 with contributions from the Bulgarian community in Sevlievo. It was reconstructed on the approximate site of a medieval monastery from the reign of Tsar Mikhail Asen. What remains from these times are fragments of a stone inscription. After the fall of the Second Bulgarian Kingdom, the monastery was abandoned and gradually fell to ruin. During the Great Plague of the 1830s, the families of several notables from Sevlievo sought safety near the remains of the monastery. This was when they vowed to restore it. So, with the help of the generous people of Sevlievo, the imposing new structure of the monastery church was erected in 1836. The locals have also preserved a unique domestic icon by Zakharia Tsanyov, commissioned by one of the town's notables. What makes it unique is that the name of the person who ordered the icon itself, Haji Sava Radkov, was written under the image of the Virgin Mary. To the right is the signature of the iconographer, who took the liberty to sign his work in direct violation of the church canon. Another church built with the active participation of the Bulgarian community in the town was the Church of the Holy Trinity. This happened after the end of the struggle for restoration of the Bulgarian Patriarchate in 1870, when the Ottoman Empire legitimized the Bulgarian Exarchate. The building was the work of a renowned Bulgarian builder from Tryavna called Usta Gencho Kanev. He also built the cathedrals in Varna and Vidin. He's often referred to as the Bulgarian Dante of architecture. He was the last builder of the Bulgarian revival and the first of the New Age. In 1834, Sevlievo restored the old church of St. Ilia to its very foundations. In order to comply with the restrictions on the height of Orthodox churches imposed by the Ottomans, the foundations of the building were dug 2 meters deep into the ground. Although the long staircase may prove difficult for elderly believers, people of all ages visit the church today to enjoy the feeling of free, open space inside it. Some icons from the old church remain, painted in 1830 by Zacharia and Simeon Tsanyov, iconographers from Tryavna. The lines and colours of the icons are comparable to the works of Raffaello. The wood carvings of the layered iconostasis are considered to be among the masterpieces of the Tryavno wood carving school. It's an example of pierced relief carving. On a clear morning, the sun's rays pierce the iconostasis and shine on the faces of the believers. The lowest row of the iconostasis is so finely carved that it looks like embroidery. A series of 12 carvings tells us the story of man's creation by God and the expulsion of Adam and Eve from Eden after they sinned. This kind of narrative art is the trademark of the Tryavno woodcarving school and is often present in the iconostases made by its craftsmen. The construction of a new secular school in Sevlievo was entirely the work of Haji Stoyan, one of the city's notables. He donated 60,000 kurus and the plot on which the school was built. The first teacher in the new school was Petko Slaveikov. He was to become a leading Bulgarian intellectual, but at this time he was prosecuted by the high Greek clergy who ruled over the Bulgarian schools. The reason was his tendency to write satirical songs about them. In one song, he claimed that the Greek priests had lost their minds and were as greedy as pigs. The people of Sevlievo gave him bread and shelter despite the pressure put on them by the Greek clergy. Slaveikov introduced the widely popular monitorial education system. Children studied Bulgarian history, arithmetic, music and gymnastics. In the second half of the 18th century, the town was thriving. Citizens thought not only about their own well-being, but also of the well-being of the entire town and ways to improve its infrastructure. Several buildings were completed at the time, including the clock tower, with bell chiming every hour, while the local craftsmen worked ceaselessly. The original mechanism, dating back to 1779, is still in use today. The famous master builder, Kolyuficitu, was invited to build a bridge over the Rosica River. This architectural masterpiece was very long for its time, 110 meters. Its original appearance is preserved in a watercolour painting by Felix Kanitz. There's an anecdotal incident related to this master of Bulgarian revival architecture. One of the town's notables asked him to build a house for him. His neighbour, another member of the guild, taunted him, "You can't build the house the way you think." To which he replied, "I'm not only planning to build a house, but it will have a facade big enough to have both you and your belly painted on it." Today the house is long gone, but the figure of a fat man is still preserved in the town's history museum. Sevlievo took an active part in the nation's struggle for political liberation from the Ottoman Empire. After the massacre and bloodshed of the most violently crushed revolution in Europe of the 19th century, the April Uprising, the Ottomans hanged 8 people on the city's market square. After the liberation, the people of Sevlievo erected a monument on the exact spot, the Monument to Freedom. The statue was created by the Italian sculptor Arnoldo Zocchi, who was also the author of the Columbus Monument in Buenos Aires and the Garibaldi Monument in Bologna. Later, he also designed the monument to the Tsar Liberator in Sofia. Zocchi was not the only foreigner to provide his services to the people of Sevlievo. The new Bulgarian authorities needed the expertise of new professionals. The German architect Hugo Gessler was employed as the chief architect of the town and the region. The Czech artist Otto Horeshi, who designed the first Bulgarian art textbook, and the Italian stonemason De Bono Apolloni also worked on the monument. The latter made the pedestal for the beautiful column of the monument. The statue was cast in Vienna and transported by ship down the Danube. Then it was loaded onto ox carts for the rest of the journey from Svistov to Sevlievo. The people of Sevlievo played another rather unconventional but major part in Bulgaria's integration into Europe. In 1872, while the rest of Bulgaria was still sitting cross-legged on Oriental Ottoman couches, the Dragoshinovi brothers opened the first workshop for the production of European-style chairs. The world-famous and beloved Bulgarian Dan Kolov. One of the internationally famous and most beloved Bulgarians, the European wrestling champion Dan Kolov was born in the village of Sennik. American journalists called him the Bulgarian Lion, Iron Hands, and even King Kong. During the 20 years of his sports career, Kolov won over 2,000 matches and hardly ever lost. After he retired from sports, after Paris and New York, Kolov chose to return to his birthplace, the village of Sennik. He was greeted with an official ceremony and offered a carriage for the rest of his journey. He refused, saying that he was going to return the way he left, on foot. He was buried on a hill facing the mountain. The locals call his grave the mountain facing the mountain. A good friend of Arnoldo Zocchi's, the sculptor Asen Peikov, was also related to the town. Peikov's teacher, the founder of Bulgarian sculpture Andrei Nikolov, was the one who introduced him to Zocchi. Asen Peikov and his brother Ilya were born in Sofia, but they spent their childhood in Sevlievo. In 1938, Asen Peikov left for Rome after completing the work on his first exhibition. There he established himself as one of the leading sculptors of the 20th century. A marquise popular in the high circles of society in Rome told the following story. I could not have imagined that something as simple as forgetting your bag at the dentist's may turn out to be so fateful. It was brought to me by a dark-skinned Bulgarian with a huge moustache, who stayed with me for the rest of my life. The marquise was Emilia Boccanera, and the Bulgarian was her second husband, the sculptor Asen Peikov. He was commissioned to make sculptures by the surrealist Giorgio de Chirico, the director Federico Fellini, and Hollywood stars Sophia Loren and Ava Gardner. In 1959, Peykov was awarded the project for a monument to Leonardo da Vinci, which now stands in Fiumicino Airport in Rome. So as not to lose contact with his homeland, despite the onset of the communist regime in Bulgaria, Arsen Peykov sent a personal gift to the Prime Minister Georgi Dimitrov in 1947. It was one of his masterpieces, a chessboard with 32 unique pieces he had carved.
Arsen Peykov sent a personal gift.
As the leader of the closest Soviet satellite state, Dimitrov was summoned to Moscow by Stalin, never to return. The chessboard disappeared, most likely appropriated by the communist elite. Angered by this fact, Arsen Peykov filed a claim against the Bulgarian state. Today, the chess set is on display in Sevlievo, in the Arsen and Ilya Peykov Town Gallery, which opened in 2008. The building which houses the gallery is also related to leather processing. It was built as the home of Ilya Denchev, one of the best leather craftsmen. Immediately after the San Stefano Treaty was signed in 1878, he hired the Austrian architect Josef Schnitter to build what became the largest and most modern European building in Sevlievo. Later it housed the regional court. It's strange that Arnold Udzoki should be more famous in Bulgaria than in his home country, while Arsen Peykov should enjoy greater popularity among the Italians than among his own people. A street in Rome overlooking the Colosseum bears his name. As it offers a splendid view over the arena, the street is crowded with tourists who enjoy having their photos taken here. Since the fall of the Berlin Wall, the unemployment rate in Sevlievo has been among the lowest in Bulgaria. Puritanism is a word with negative connotations in Bulgarian. But its underlying values, such as hard work, pragmatism and faith, were the foundations for the success of cities like Manchester and Hamburg. Since 1886, the history of Sevlievo has been a constant symphony. Sevlievo's brass band played for weddings and funerals, sent soldiers off to the battlefields and welcomed back heroes. It was created along the lines of European trends at the time and has become a symbol of the region. A lot of things may seem strange about Sevlievo, but one thing is certain. Its citizens love having fun. On celebration days at least. Otherwise, there were two forces which helped the town rise from the ashes of the once glorious fortress of Hotalic. One was hard work, the other one is a job well done.